Poetry. Oh my goodness, there's so many people that think that poetry is junk, and just as many people, many more, who think that poetry is beautiful. Of course, it all depends on the kind of poetry you get into. I think that can be a bit of a factor. Sometimes we just do anything in order to get a rhyme, and that doesn't work out. But this fellow that was around, a few years before I was, Ralph Waldo Emerson, writing about poets, he says, "The poet knows that he speaks adequately when he speaks somewhat wildly, with the flower of the mind, with intellect released from all service, as the traveler who has lost his way throws his reins on his horse's neck and trusts to the instinct of the animal to find his road, so must we do. We must do the same with the divine animal who carries us through this world." He's going on now to say that this is the response poets love. Oh yes. Wine, meat, narcotics, coffee, tea, opium, fumes of sandalwood and tobacco, or whatever others procurers of animal exhilaration. Now that's all Ralph Waldo Emerson, way back. The poet knows that he speaks adequately when he speaks somewhat wildly. Well, that's exactly what Emerson did. When you get on a little too far, you go on and on and on. You're trying to say things with too many comparisons, perhaps. It can happen that way. And when it's poetry, you can write it all the time. All that counts is whether it rhymes. Oh, isn't that exciting? Rhyme, rhyme, rhyme. Yes. But if you live in Ohio at Lima, you then can come up with a good rhyma. Isn't that exciting? And of course, he's a poet and doesn't know it. Words that rhyme, rhyme, that seems to be what is very big. But here is Emerson saying that he is going to speak. He speaks adequately when he speaks somewhat wildly. That is to say, not just say it the ordinary way, so that the person listening to you says simply, but to say it just a little differently, to have something that would be, perhaps would help the person remember what was said. So on. That's the kind of thing that counts. Saying a little differently, and yet, of course, there can be a wrong response to that. This rear view mirror. Well, suppose you've got an automobile. You see, he said it had a rear view mirror and a policeman in it. Well, that's one thing. But suppose you said a rear view mirror with a policeman in it. Now you see, is that the policeman in the car? Is the policeman in the mirror? We got to be careful how we say things. What are we going to do about this? 2 and 2 is 4. Is that right? Or is it 2 and 2 are 4? Well, I can interpret that one both ways as being satisfactory, but I don't like the redundancy of the reason is because do. Don't say that. Just say the reason is that he did it or that he didn't, whatever it might be. But don't say the because all the time. It seems to run in there so often. And we go back to the words, the meanings of them, the simplicity of them, and in the poetry. Being able to say it just a little differently, speak somewhat wildly. That makes it a poem. That's what to say. When you don't just say it's nice out, but you say it reminds me of doodly doodly doo doo doo, something that's maybe across the ocean. But that's an element there, of course, with the difference, not just saying it directly. And we tend to say things, Oh yes, that happens in the classroom too, doesn't it? On occasion, when we don't quite know the words to use, if we're Well, we just say, yep, and nope. So they can be, and this old former prof here is going to say, well, I think I've taken enough of your time now. Yep. And so I guess I'll close it out. Okay? Here's the KO. Names of cities can go on and on and on with a lot of fun, it seems to me. Why is it so dry outside? What's the name of the city in Ohio that tells us why it's so dry outside? Well, it's Lorain, Ohio. Well, a lot of fun with that. You can go on and on and on. What's the city that has to be Billstown? Bills? Bill who? Well, just Bill. Well, what's the city that has to be Billstown? Williamsburg. Yes. Or here's one that's a little more complicated maybe, but just as much fun. Yes, that's right. A city in Ohio that provides the same placement role as the letter N. Well, no, wait a minute. The same placement role, R-O-L-E, yes, as the letter N. What does the letter N do? Well, let's think. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T. Well, so we know that the letter O comes right after N, don't we? The city in Ohio. What is the city that provides the same role, the same activity of placement as the letter N? Toledo. To lead O. M-N-O. See, the N leads right into O. Toledo. It has the same placement role, the name of it, as the letter N. Ho, ho, ho. Did you get that? I hope so. A city in Florida that describes a new home that a man made. The home has 9 stories. It's 9 stories high. What city in Florida describes that new home? Tallahassee. Tallahassee. Words, fun words. Oh, yes, we can have fun words. We can even have them on a little couple of minutes together, as I appreciate having with you. If anybody listens, I'm not sure. But see, the words give us all sorts of possibilities. It does. For example, take the word Fahrenheit. And we know that, but Fahrenheit means that it's a moderately tall person, doesn't it? What can you say about him? Oh, he's Fahrenheit. Would that mean he has a temperature? My goodness. Now, using those words in different ways can say something directly or indirectly. Can say something, of course, nice or not so nice. Yes, that can happen. Well, just for example, take something. You got a big name band. You ever heard of that phrase, a big name band? Yes. Have you ever heard a big name band? Who's heard of a big name band? Well, it's why would they call it a big name band? Well, because the leader is a fellow named Fernandez Fenter Hazenberry Manser by Cousin Pardagosan. That would be a big name band, wouldn't it? If he used his name every time. Just made that up, of course. That's all that counts. That's all that counts. But, well, it's just a way that you get into these things. Fahrenheit's a moderately tall person, of course. I indicated that before. Rehearsal. Now, there's a word that's we got to think about. Have you ever heard of the word rehearsal? If you're just going to go through it once, did you just rehearsal or hearse? But if you did it twice, then you rehearsed or had a rehearsal. Don't understand what we're going to do with that word. Oh, but I know what we're going to do with another word. That's the goodbye words. Taking enough of your time. We'll be back with you next week. Bye-bye. Is it a far-off thing? Is it worth all the effort? In a world that seems so mechanical, so set in its ways, how does creativity fit in the picture? I wonder. Well, it was a young lady, a student of mine in creative writing at Mount Union College some years ago. She's now a housewife and a mother, but she noted that, and I'm quoting, creativity is lauded on campus. It's cute, it's famous. Daydreaming is almost spiritual. Now, she said that when she was my student, of course. It sounds as though the effort to be creative is certainly noble and obviously full of rewards, doesn't it? But, well, she had some more to say. She said, we all know what happens to old soldiers, but what happens to old daydreamers? There's no time to write. It's just too much to do. Well, let's see now. She said that when she was on campus as a young student. Yeah, she was made to write. I gave assignments, and of course grades were at stake. My goodness. And she says, old professor, you know what I do? I look out the kitchen window. I don't know that I should. I resent the imposition. I don't know what I can. Who needs it? Yes, who needs that? Looking out the kitchen window and daydreaming and having creativity as a kind of an abstract activity, you see. She says, you once told me I was a creative person. If that's true, then it's a curse. Intelligence means perpetual purgatory. Wow. What a statement. Well, I'm groping for conclusions because is creativity out of step? But then all those classroom discussions about creative expression, the use of picture words, and the efficiency in writing, they all come back to mind with full justification when I continue reading her letter. She said, quote, my neighbor is an avocado, but her kitchen is clean, and her Spam and frozen peas are always on time. I think that's beautiful. And you see, in her letter to me, she gave me some creativity. Not in daydreams, but in sharp, specific words that give the picture and do justice to all of her frustrations. No, I've never thought of a person as an avocado before, but now I know what one is like. Yes, my former student daydreams. She shares herself in creative language. And that's the core of this business of being creative. It's that extra step, that extra flair in just being yourself. Anybody can say, my neighbor, she gets things done, but you know what I mean? There's something missing? No. She just said, she didn't write that. My former student wrote that she preferred avocado, Spam, and frozen peas. Yeah, to make the point. Well, I'm going to to be creative is not to make something out of nothing. It's to see that little extra flair, that extra bounce, which stems from altering what we already have. Robert Frost, you've heard of him, I'm sure. He has said that all an artist needs is samples. Interesting. See, it's not daydreams, but it's the everyday encounters from which creative thought and expression stems, from the classroom and from the business office, the high mountains, the desert, the ocean, the skies above, even from home. Mm-hmm. Creativity is not purgatory. It's more like avocado and Spam and frozen peas. Back with you next week. I've been thinking about conceit. That is the way in which I'll just start with myself. We sometimes think too much of yes. But there's a little book called 2,100 Laughs for All Occasions. Bob Orban is the author of this book. Now, it's not a recent book, please understand. I think it came out in the early 1970s. But in any event, it's got some it's got excellent material in it. Bob Orban did a great deal of writing for comedians. But under the heading of conceit, are you conceited? Well, is he conceited? He thinks they wrote a song about him, yeah. What does the song say? The best things in life are me. Is he conceited? He could gain 5 pounds just from swallowing his pride. Ooh, that was a good one. In this book, conceited, his idea of being unfaithful, you know what his idea of that is? turning away from the mirror. Is he really conceited? He has the only head in town with stretch marks. That's a cute way of saying something about conceit. Well, these are all in this book, as I mentioned to you, 2,100 laughs for all occasions. They're just made up. But they're good laughs. I think they certainly can be. Under the heading of electricity, this is one of my favorites in the whole book. He says, I wish our power company would improve its insulation. I just got my electric bill, and did I get a shock? Yes. Got a shock just finding out what his electric bill is going to be. I think that's good. Oh, about electricity also. Bob Orban writes, they say the electric utilities are in trouble. I didn't believe it until they sent me that wind-up light bulb. Get a light bulb that's a wind-up bulb. That would be something, yes. Maybe we ought to have those sometime. Yeah, we can consider it anyway. Oh, yes. Under the heading of hair, he writes, nowadays you can spend $20 for an electric comb, but that doesn't include the accessories. But for another $9, you can get a power parter. Got it? A power parter? Part your hair and power. Oh, well. Better not run into that one much longer. Anyway, under the heading of Halloweens, I kind of like this one, too. Well, it's got some fun in it. I can remember when you run around on Halloween collecting candy and cookies and apples, and it was trick or treat. Now it's dinner. Well, the dinner's going to be trick or treat, huh? Trick or treat, you know what that is? It's what the kids play on Halloween, and it's what the supermarkets play all the rest of the year. Ho, ho, ho. Trick or treat. All what the supermarkets play. I don't know about that. But anyway, that was in the book. Except that. Well, anyway, here we go with under the heading of money. Do you remember when people had get up and go and savings didn't? Yeah, people had get up and go, but now savings didn't do that. Well, anyway. He writes here, I just saw a dumb sign. It said coin laundry. He says, well, I don't have mine long enough to get dirty. He doesn't keep his clothing long enough to get dirty. Well, I guess that's one way to keep it clean, huh? Toss it away. Oh, well. That's just for fun. That said, of course, we understand. Yes, but imagine this. These little items in here under more than 2,000 little funny lines. They may have some great meaning to them, of course. Yes. Let's see, this may seem hard to believe, but I saw a movie on TV that was so old, the girl said no. Yeah. I haven't been to a movie for years and years and years because I don't care for most of what's in it. That's true. But I was trying to be funny here today. I guess I better wrap it up. 2,100 laughs for all occasions. Well, we had a bunch of them here. What occasion? Oh, it was for this program. Back with you next week. Well, hello. This old English professor would like to, retired English professor, would like to share with you some things about the stinging writing of Ambrose Bierce. You know, after a harrowing season, all sorts of, we had the pre-election sillies, every time there's the election and so on. Anyway, I think this is a good time not to think about elections, but maybe about Ambrose Bierce. That's right. He was not the best known of Ohio published writers. He was a 19th century storyteller Yeah. And for purposes, he offered some of the most cynical observations of his day. At least I think so. And maybe it's from our day, too. Yeah, could be. Ambrose Bierce made some stinging observations. He defined the term defame. That's frequently used in election puffery and so on, where somebody defames something. He says to defame is also to lie about another. That would defame that person. But then he adds, it's also to tell the truth about another. Ha ha. What about the term vote? Bierce said it was the instrument and symbol of a free man's power to make a fool of himself and to make a wreck of his country. Yes, he defined politics. Get this, the definition that Ambrose Bierce had of politics. Politics, the most acceptable hypocrisy. Ooh, that's pretty rough. But language can be cynical, can it? Sometimes cynicism can be effective. Usually it's to be deplored, I would presume. But there's at least an ounce of truth, I think, in Ambrose Bierce's definition of the word peace, P-E-A-C-E. Bierce said peace is, quote, an international affairs, a period of cheating between two periods of fighting. Yes. One period of cheating between two periods of fighting. That's what peace is. Oh, that's terrible. Incidentally, Bierce was born in 1842 down near Athens, Ohio. And he was, I think he was in Mexico around 32 or something. 1913 it was, I believe, when he passed. Anyway. He's got a lot of definitions in some of his books. One of the books is called The Devil's Dictionary. Yeah. Get this. A politician. What is a politician? And here's Bierce's definition in his Devil's Dictionary. Quote, a politician is an eel in the fundamental mud upon which the superstructure of organized society is rendered. When he wriggles, he mistakes the agitation of his tail for the trembling of the edifice. As compared with a statesman, he suffers the disadvantage of being alive. Oh, my goodness. How do you define the word twice? His definition, it's once too often. So, see how he gets along here. Now, I must confess he talks about politicians a great deal in his books, but I'm no politician. My observations are second-handed, but I've encountered many an effective persuasion, whether or not tinged with cynical dimension, though. And, well, I'm thinking of a year when I was still teaching at Mount Union College. You know, I taught here for 36 years before I retired. But anyway, it was a year, and it was something that one of my students said. I had just become a grandfather for the first time, and I decided to celebrate by going into my American literature class and giving them a Grandpop quiz. Yes. But many in the class had not read the assignment for that day, and many had just turned in blank pages. When I was ready to give a series of failing grades, then yes. But I read this note appended to the otherwise blank page of the Grandpop quiz. Turned in by Michelle, one of my more innovative students. What she wrote was, it was sassy, thoroughly sassy, but it was an extremely persuasive note, too. I mean, what are they going to do? Give them this pop quiz that they hadn't prepared for. This is what she said. Professor Crist, do you realize if I flunk this course, I'll have to enroll in another one of your classes in the spring semester? Is that really what you want? I decided not to count the grades of the Grandpop quiz that day. And I know that Michelle will make a far better politician than the kind Ambrose Bierce had in mind. Well, that's it for today. Back with you next week. I understand that all the new students on campus makes certainly a very fine enrollment number for Mount Union College, and I'm very grateful to be part of it. And looking back over all those years, I'm a part of it, just barely, being an old retired prof. But the fact remains that I think about, well, in the English department, you see, I taught that freshman writing class. Composition, we called it. But in thinking about that many years ago, this actually happened, as it was in a story about this in a magazine. I remember it was at Duke University. And at that time, they had inaugurated a compulsory writing course for all seniors who were majoring in engineering. And of course, they wanted to make sure that all the technical graduates could express themselves very adequately. But nobody in the senior class was pleased with that idea. And they wailed, "Oh, well, we took freshman comp when we're seniors. And who needs to know more about writing anyway?" Yes, you can imagine them saying that, petulant and defiant and so on. They filled the lecture hall wherein the ignominious course was to be taught. Yes, that's true. And finally, an English professor strode into the room, and he was, of course, hated immediately. He very coldly surveyed the class, and then he made a startling announcement. These are all the engineering seniors now at Duke University that had to take this compulsory writing class, even though they were seniors and in their last semester there. Anyway, the professor said, "You don't want to take this class, and I don't want to teach it. After all, you're seniors, aren't you? And it was 4 years ago you had a writing class, didn't you? Now, you are technical people, and so I think this course is entirely unnecessary." Oh, did that create a reaction? Did that create a reaction? Yes, it did. My goodness, this was beautiful. The class, all of those engineering seniors, they leaned forward in unison, and for the first time, smiles appeared on their faces, and they said, "Right on, right on, right on." Oh, it was just wonderful. This is at Duke University now, not Mount Union College. But anyway, the professor said, "Well, I think we can all get out of this course." Oh, that was wonderful. The applause all over the room there. That's just great. And then the professor in charge said, "Now all we need to do is write a letter to the Dean of Engineering School expressing our concerns and our reasons and our conclusions." And of course everybody said, "Hooray, hooray, that's wonderful, that's wonderful." The professor was very happy at their reaction. "All right, now," he said, "all right, we'll draft a letter. Now, who in here will volunteer to write the letter that will convince the dean that we don't need this class?" It's kind of deafening silence followed. And perhaps you know what's going to happen now, of course, after this silence. The professor said again, "Isn't there anyone in here? Isn't there anyone at all who can write this letter on our behalf?" Silence. All over the place. No response. And so then the professor dropped the smile that he'd had, and he said, "Oh, you're seniors, and not one of you can write a simple letter of persuasion? Oh, my goodness, we've got no time to lose. Let's get down to business." And he added that the course now would be much more difficult than he had planned. This is true. I had read this some years ago in the Technical Magazine. This goes back to Duke University when they had this compulsory writing course for the seniors majoring in engineering. They didn't want to do it. But you see, nobody volunteered to do it. Nobody felt they had this would be something other than a terribly, wretched thing to do, because it would be so hard to do. I mean, you've got to write a letter to explain all of that, and why, oh my goodness. And yet, of course, that is what needs to be done many times. The linking of, you might say, of communication and science. They were the ones in science, of course, but the communication is what we all need. There's no question about it. And so, the semester's in its early stages now, and there may be some classes you have to take that you didn't think you would like or didn't want to take. Keep in mind this little account from way out there in Duke University some years ago. I think there's a good point to it. Yes. And of course, to everyone at Mount Union, the new students and others, well, my best for you and all of you. I trust it. You'll be learning as well as having, well, a little bit of fun now and then even. And you can have that in the classroom also. But it's even more if you know how to do what the classroom is supposed to be learning to do. Well, that's